All right, so we're going to do some confidence intervals in Excel. So go ahead and open up the confidence interval workbook. And this first tab is confidence intervals for the mean. And what we have is length of life in hours of light bulbs. Okay, so we want to make a 95% confidence interval for the mean, mu. Okay, so let's just go ahead and fill this worksheet out, and so we can establish our confidence interval. So our sample mean, so we should know how to do this. This is equals average, and I select my data. So going all the way down to row 81. Okay, standard deviation equal standard dev dot s, and I'm going to go ahead and select my data. Close parenthesis, enter. Okay, sample size, so here we can use the count function, so equals count, select our data, and enter. Standard error, so the standard error is our standard deviation divided by the square root of n, so let's go ahead and do equals standard deviation divided by, I'm going to put parentheses, square root of 80, put a parenthesis around the square root, or around the square root function, and then for the denominator, click enter. Okay, I get a standard error of 122.6. So I will go ahead and show you what I typed in there. Okay, so recall that this is our formula for the confidence interval for the mean. We're gonna, if we're doing this in Excel, just assume we'll always be using t, because sigma is going to be unknown. Okay, we want a 95% confidence interval, which means our confidence level is 0.95. Alpha, well, we know alpha is 1 minus our confidence interval, so we'll do equals 1 minus confidence level, and enter. Okay, so we have, now we need to look up our critical value. So our critical value is t. So here we're going to feed it our alpha over 2. So recall that our t statistic, we have t, alpha over 2 equals 0.025, and then for degrees of freedom, it's going to be n minus 1, or just 79 degrees of freedom. Okay, so we're going to use a function which is t dot inverse. So we're going to do equals t dot inverse, open parenthesis. Okay, so notice that the first argument is probability. So probability we want to be alpha over 2. And this is, if we just give it alpha over 2, it's going to give us a negative value. We want a positive value. So what we're going to do, whenever we're doing confidence intervals, we're just going to do 1 minus alpha divided by 2. So just 1 minus alpha divided by 2. That's how we are going to put in our probability for t dot inverse. Okay, and now, comma, degrees of freedom. So that's going to be 80. So I'm going to click 80 minus 1, because it's n minus 1 degrees of freedom. Close the parenthesis, enter. Okay, so we now get our critical value of t. So this is our function. So just, it's always 1 minus alpha over 2, comma, n minus 1. That is how we use t dot inverse. Okay, so we have our t statistic. It's 1.99. We have s divided by root n, which is 122.6. So our margin of error, which is just this piece over here, is our t statistic times our standard error. So we're just going to multiply those two together. So let's do equals standard, or let's do t statistic. No, sorry. Let's do standard error times t statistic 1.99 and enter. Okay, so now we have this whole piece, t times s over square root of n. So now we want to create a lower bound for our confidence interval. So we're just going to take our sample mean, subtract the margin of error, and then for the upper bound, we'll take our sample mean and add the margin of error. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do equals. So the lower bound is the sample mean minus our margin of error, which is 243.95. And now let's do our upper bound, which is equals sample mean, but now plus margin of error 243.95, and enter. So that means our confidence interval is going to be, so mu, it's going to be between 49,396 and 49,884. So if we were to interpret this, we would say we are 95%. We are 95% confident that the population average length of life of a light bulb is between 49,396 and 49,884 hours. Okay, and that's how we do a confidence interval in Excel. So when doing the homework, I recommend just like copying and pasting this table into a new formula sheet, and then just using this to structure how you work through a confidence interval. Okay, in the next video, we will do a confidence interval for the proportion.